A lot of what I'm going to show you today is just features bundled into an app I created for my own purposes, meaning I don't plan to go sell this app to anybody. It is just something that I use when I have a project or when I have a client or when I have something I want to research. It's easy to open up an app I've built myself because all the things that I need are there. It's sort of like a home office that you would take on the road if you are someone who has to work remotely. So, I'm going to cover a lot of territory today. I don't expect you to stay with me through it, but I expect to get through it so that I can start to explain to people who work in content, in journalism, in communications in general, that some of the solutions that we've had to rely on developers for in the past, they're just gone. And AI makes it very easy to put solutions together that help you in your own job. And whether or not you think your job should be automated or not, and I'm pretty vain. I'm like, no, I'm so important. My job shouldn't be automated. Let's be real. There are all things during the workday that we could use technology for to accelerate our work or make it better. AI is just a tool. It's just another tool like Photoshop, like Canva, if you use it. If you're doing 3D modeling, it's, ArcGIS, mapping, it's anything you want it to be. But what AI is integrated in most software now. So if you're a content creator and you've got coding curiosity, you're code curious, you can find a way to get there. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, because this is my getting there for the things that I have to do. So the first thing you're going to notice is that this app is map driven. There's going to be 3 layers of navigation. I'm going to have the right-hand navigation where I can toggle between 2D and 3D mode. And then I've got different things on the left that are part of the integrated experience. Maybe I want to look at a layer. Maybe I want to figure out where transportation is. Maybe I want to bring in a data layer. All of these things are sort of in this as features so that if I need to move quickly through a project, can do it. So let's talk about my new adopted city of Dallas. Because I'm from Oklahoma, I can do the accent pretty well, although people wouldn't hold me to it. So I'm going to bring up Dallas just as an example of what we can do, first of all, with this mapping layer. Because if you have to produce visualizations for any purpose, on air, print, maybe you work for an architecture firm that needs to do stuff, the first thing we can do is integrate with APIs and bring in visualizations that are pretty stunning. And so I'm going to go into a new layer mode. I'm going to zoom out so that everyone can see where I am. Here I still am in Dallas. Here. This is the overhead view of what downtown Dallas looks like. And if I'm into transportation and logistics, I can back out and see a total view of everything from a map perspective. But I can also go into selections to say, I want this to look a certain way. And the first thing I'm going to do is move it into 3D mode so that as I scroll back in, I'm looking at downtown Dallas in 3D mode. And how can you tell? Well, you've got the shadows, but if I toggle this and I change the slant, we've got everything that we need in 3D mode. So this is downtown Dallas. I'm bringing it in via Google Places API. I am using an application called Replit for this. There are other applications out there, but I started using Replit early thanks to some old friends at Horizontal Digital who showed me how to use it. And I like it, so I use it. But if you're an evangelist of another platform, you can probably do a lot of what I'm showing you here It really is just about putting the pieces together from a back end, front end, and deployment perspective. So the first thing I can do here is get really granular. So let's say I'm focusing in on, what's one of the cooler things? Okay, the JFK assassination site. Here's Reunion Tower. I can really get in here and look at the grassy knoll. This is where JFK was shot, right here. This is the Texas Book Depository building. This is the grassy knoll. This is the train tracks. Go watch JFK if you want to hear all about it. But what I can do here then, because this is loaded up, is I can set up a pan view if I wanted to record this for a presentation. I can put a spin on it if I wanted to do that level of granularity and visualization. I have controls here so that I can control the speed of how quick the camera moves, so that if I wanted to move faster, I can. And then if I wanted to reset the visualization or move it over or change it, I've got micro controls that give me that level. But regardless of what your job is, if I'm producing content for a newscast and I'm trying to show where, let's see, a good example would be Turtle Creek is compared to downtown Oklahoma City, or the vicinity of the Trinity River to downtown Dallas. I keep saying Oklahoma City because that's my hometown, sorry. But if I wanted to answer that question, where is Turtle Creek and related to downtown Dallas, I can tee up the visualization from that perspective, look at Turtle Creek here, and then if I wanted to get really, really deep and focus in on Turtle Creek as my area of interest, and then move my visualization through that area of town. So this is not AI per se, but this is mock, meaning it is built with a mock architecture in mind. Microservices, APIs, cloud-based, headless. Thank you, Sheetal Jane at Horizontal for teaching me that. Now, what's cool about this is I can enable AI as a research layer. So that's just an API being pulled in at the map layer, but let's say I want to research something in this vicinity. I can run a search and it's going to bring up all the different places. And if John F. Kennedy Memorial is what I want to research, I can add this into my area, and then I can see everything about it. I can see the street view, the directions, the lat long. Here, I can generate insights because I've isolated my location. I can then set up back-end code that says, well, when I look at a location, generate insights. And these insights are whatever I want them to be, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute. But I'm a history buff. It's always been my fantasy to produce an application where when I travel the country, I say that with when, I can stop anywhere and I can open up an application I created to see things around me. So let's say I want to see and find out about the Kennedy Memorial. Here's all the details. Here's the architectural. Here's the significance. It's anything I want it to be. I could expand this view, copy it. If I go down, I can create a shot list if I'm using this application for what the shot should be based on what location I'm looking at. So this is more for creators to say, okay, well, if you wanted to do a mini segment on this memorial, here's what we suggest. But what I really want to stress here is everything in digital is a mix and match of APIs, front-end, back-end programming, and where you put the code. So what appears in this flyout is because I like historical research. But if you wanted to do something else, it could be something else. That's sort of the fun of it. But for me, I want to be able to look up research. So I've integrated with Wikipedia to say, wow, that's not accurate at all. Hey, got a work to do. It looked up the John F. Kennedy Memorial Plaza as in Washington. So we'll refine some of this as we go. But if I wanted to make this Dallas specific, I can look up YouTube videos related to it. If I wanted to look at the New York Times archives, and we'll just get I probably should have looked up the memorial site. In fact, I'm gonna make you guys stick with me for a minute. I am going to look up a place that is tied to Dallas. So the 6th floor museum. Let's do that instead because that doesn't have a Washington link. So here, I'm going to run an analysis of 6th floor museum at Dealey Plaza. This is what I have pulled up in the map. If I pull it over into 3D mode, I can see it in 3D mode. If I were to open up my controls, I could put it into different visualization. But I'm using this to research the 6th floor museum at Dealey Plaza, which is where Lee Harvey Oswald was when he allegedly shot John F. Kennedy. We'll get into that later. Watch JFK. Okay, so the first thing I can do, because I've isolated the location, I've pulled in all these things. These are relevant to this topic, so I'll get into this later if you ever want to talk about it, set up time. But I'm going to generate insights based on this location of 6th floor museum at Dealey Plaza. And it is going to return out a location overview and a background that I have generated with a prompt. I'm going to show you that in a minute, but let's stick to the facts, ma'am. Here we are. We are in Dallas. We're looking at Dealey Plaza, and if I wanted to put this in 3D mode, I can. Let's tilt it out. All right. I'm looking at Dealey Plaza. I want to be able to see the historical context. 6th floor was used, its pivotal role in history, used it to shoot JFK. That's where he was shot, right here. Here's the evolution of the site. Here's the architecture details. Here's the cultural significance. But because I'm a content creator and I want to use this application to generate visuals for on-air use, I can then do a shot list based on what it recommends. And this might be a blend of this application and me sending a crew out to do this work. It doesn't matter, but I'm just saying what I think should happen. And then when you get down into these different things I can bring in based on the location, this stuff's not AI. What it is APIs. And these APIs are the engine behind this application that you don't see. Think of it like a Formula One race car. You know that you've got what you see on the front end, a really nice car with a skin and it looks fine. That's the front end of the site. That's what you see here, the icons, the visuals, the fonts. But under the hood are APIs and microservices that drive the performance of this application. And that's what I'm showing you here. I'm a history buff, so I want to travel the world and I want to explain the context of history to people and be able to explain, well, when they said the guys ran down the railroad as part of the big conspiracy, this is where the railroads were. And it's just really kind of cool because if we had this back in the day, you can guarantee the Warren Commission would have this visualization where we could say, okay, then it happened and they ended up going here. And, it's whatever you want to tell the story with. But for me, I wanted to be able to still enrich my data layer with more research, so I integrate with Wikipedia to bring up sort of, group think around what research is, and Wikipedia is a great source. I do YouTube so that I can see videos from YouTube, and if I wanted to bring in a URL for audio purposes, I built another application that allows me to do that. We could look at historical newspapers, we could look at photos and prints, we could look at Internet Archive books. It's anything we want it to be, but because I sort of work in content, I also wanted to know, well, maybe who in this area would give to political candidates. So this is where we could integrate with things like the FEC, which is a rabbit hole I'm not even going to worry about. So this is the first thing I wanted to sort of emphasize is newsrooms. If you are thinking about using Google as a visualization tool and you aren't building your own applications to integrate with the API layer, that is a missed opportunity because of what we can do with this stuff. It's a gold mine. Social media, location-based, digital shorts. Whatever we want them to be, it can be. But as a researcher, I just wanted to be able to say, okay, let's create a great visual of a location and then export it as a snapshot. So I can save this to my computer as a visual here and open it up. And then I wanted to be able to say, okay, let me research a location. But this led to, okay, well, we have all these APIs. Maybe we want to look at this map differently. And that's what I wanted to stress too, is that now that we've got this map in via API, we've got a bunch of capabilities that we can use to make this look different than it looks now. So if I wanted to make it look historic or vintage or black and white, if I wanted to make it far more dramatic or more contrasty because of the colors I wanted to reach, or cool or warm, I've got these controls, but this is the only layer I'm really paying for. You'll notice these other layers are free. So once I do my base images, I'm operating at this layer. And I'm really trying to see all the things I can do with this location, which is the segue into what I'm going to talk about next. So now, I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to actually refresh this and go back to this view because it's 2D view 1. This is not Google Places API. Google Places API is when I integrate with the search box, but this is OpenStreet, meaning it's open source, and it is a very good visualization of what is happening at the micro level in many, many neighborhoods in the world. So I can come in here, and if I know, let's talk about that example of Dealey Plaza. Here is that same overhead view in OpenStreet View. Here, I've got the train tracks. And I'll actually I was going to open up the other one, but you saw it. So here's where he was shot. Here's the train tracks. Here's Dealey Plaza. Here's the book depository building. Because I am in research mode, let's go in here again. If I bring open the other flyout, let's close that for now here. I'm going to be able to say, okay, show me everything that's going on around this location. Now, if I'm a business, I'm literally interested in transportation. And I'll open up in a couple weeks. I'll be talking about more industry uses about some of this stuff. But for now, let's just talk about, I'm a history buff. I want to know what's going on. I've got everything related to the event here, and if I run a search for what's around it, I can set a radius in miles. So if I'm going to go around this location, I'm going to look at different tourist attractions, but under this pull-down menu, we can get very, very specific about what we're looking for. And when we've got people coming from across the globe to do the World Cup, or across the globe to visit Oklahoma City for the first time, you can bet your bottom dollar they are not going to stay at the hotel. They are going to want to look around and see things and experience things. So something like this, where we could give navigational cues, is a gold mine. But what I really wanted to paint is the picture that's just another microservice to me, in that if we can integrate it with an API, then we can make it a reality, and then we can make researching and some of these visualizations very, very easy. But some of the other things we can do is start to paint a picture. If I scroll out, and I'm going to go into a different layer. Let's go into grayscale. So now this is a different base map. This is a grayscale base map. So I can see all around Dallas. And for people interested, I live up here. Okay, so here I'm going to bring in this base map. If I wanted it to be dark, I could make it dark. If I wanted to make it light, I can make it light. But as I bring in my rail networks now, let's see, rail networks, I can really see how rail traffic moves in and out of Dallas and through the Fort Worth area. And this is more of an industry use case. If you're in planning or if you're in logistics, you need to know how to send a product from point A to point B. But what we're really talking about is, in this app, I'm trying to paint a picture for a business group or for an organization or for my clients that would say, tell me all about transportation in Dallas. That's my deliverable. The program is deliverable for how all this stuff gets made. But I'm just trying to paint a picture of, here's what current state is, then how we can, with data, show all the different things that might be of value. So if I'm shipping something by rail, we can show all the rail limits that would be applicable so that we can do fuel estimations and that sort of thing. If I wanted to be able to then clear this map and say, no, I'm not traveling by rail, we have to travel by the U.S. interstate system, and have some proximity to suppliers that work via a highway system, I can start to paint a picture of why Dallas is a great location for that, because of its tentacles up to Oklahoma, over to Louisiana and Arkansas, down to the Gulf of Mexico, and over to New Mexico on the west. The next part we can do, and I'll just clear this, is to look at recreation. So if I want to see hiking trails around a specific location, I can. It's affected by the zoom level of the map often and the size of the trails, so that you would want to be able to get really granular and look at a trail and where you should walk. You can do that in what it recommends through the city, so there's a lot of opportunities there. If I am someone who cycles, I want to be able to scroll out and see all the ways to bike around Dallas. And as someone who moved to Dallas mainly for family needs and to be closer to home for that phase of my life, this has been a godsend. Yay, Dallas. Love. your biking trails. But we can really get in here and say, okay, what needs to be connected from a planning perspective? How are we going to bring all these things together? And I think that just becomes the fun of it. But back to the case of the people who are visiting for the World Cup. If there's biking enthusiasts, they're going to need to know how to navigate this trail system in order to see the city. Some are going to be over here for as long as 30 days at a time because of the way the schedule will work, if not longer. So we just want to be able to think ahead and think about that, and that is what that is for. So I'm going to clear that out, and then I'm going to go, okay, this is peak nerd stuff, but this is for me. This application is not for a client. I'm big into learning about drones right now because I believe one of the biggest opportunities in automation will be field service automation. If I can fly over a pipeline every night with a drone and say there is a leak or not, the probability of a leak existing for several days and affecting X radius of environmental damage is reduced. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. We need to think about that. So I got into droning and I am not great at it, but I am learning because of what I'm going to show you next. If you're a pilot, you do not see what other people see when they look at the United States. This is pixelated, but they see something like this, which is airports and zones that you need to respect with different regulations that affect where you can go and how you can get there. So if I scroll in and I look at Dallas, this is what a pilot sees in one of their sectional navigation maps. And the part I was showing you is Dallas, downtown Dallas. But if you're a pilot, you're navigating between different airports, and they're designated by these icons that you see. And I am not a pilot. If someone looks at this and says that I get a phrase wrong, do not call me. I am not a pilot. I am a journalist who's learning about drones, so shoot me. But this is sort of the view of the map, and if I'm trying to fly a drone, the expectation is I understand this. And I know how high I can fly my drone. I understand where I can fly it. And if I'm taping, let's say, a house and doing an overhead shot, then I'm not going to cause problems for either police or for the government because they would have to deal with it. So you're expected to know what you're looking at, but don't even worry about this view. It's this view where we just need to know what area of the country we're looking at, and then we can get in, and within that one area, this language does mean something because it's this language that's repeated over and over again off the map. But the reason this matters is back to that use case of pipeline surveillance. If I am going to fly a drone every night, and I know that I am operating, let's say, well, let's get in here and say I am operating in College Station, Texas. If I blow this out, I am smack dab in the middle of an airspace that I need to respect. How high I can go, what rules exist if I run into problems, whether or not I lose line of sight from my drone, what the repercussions are, who I need to talk about, what if I lose it. All of these maps have contours that mean different elevation rates and mean different mountain ranges and different things. Hazards, like, again, don't shoot me. But on a map, if I'm trying to explain something, that matters. And so I'm going to scrub this out and then go back to another aviation view. The other things pilot sees is this view, which is if you're going from one point to another, let's say Dallas is still your focus area. No, we'll stay down here. So George Bush International Airport down in Houston, as they travel, there's going to be different mileages and headings that the pilots need to follow. So if you're setting up a drone route and it's location 1 to location 2 based on a pipeline that travels from a city to a city, we can start to estimate out how much mileage we're talking about, where we're talking about in setting the route so that we can start to do that level of transportation and logistical planning. Let's take this issue of you're in transportation logistics. You know that you need to send your product from Oklahoma down to the Gulf of Mexico. We've talked about all the different ways that we could estimate it out with aviation and the mileage and the highway system stuff I showed you earlier, but this is the seaports. So if we want to know a route a ship needs to take, we can actually go into our map and see those visualizations. And I admit that this part is a work in progress. When I do research, I actually have a click off to the map to a service that does this a lot better for what I need to do. But from a visualization perspective, it's just another layer that I can bring in that will inform my strategy, where the ships are, where the oil facilities are, so that if there is some sort of problem and we need to respond to it, we can do that. Okay. So this is where it gets into this energy and infrastructure piece of this. Because I'm an oil and gas kid, my parents worked in the industry, and I grew up in Oklahoma. Understanding where oil and gas pipelines are is very important. So everybody wonders why Cushing, Oklahoma is such a big deal. It's because this view, which is a lot of those oil pipelines, go smack dab through Cushing out to different places. But also we can start to sense the natural gas pipeline environment as well. And if you look at how oil and natural gas would overlay together, a combination of answering the energy needs of the country, then you can start to visualize that too. And what I haven't built out are the placements for the different solar plants and all of that. So if people are on that end of the spectrum and they're worried about that part of the energy equation, I am working on it. Again, do not email me. Okay. So we've talked about sort of the energy infrastructure bit. This hiking trails and cycling routes thing, I really want to talk about in relation to what is in the national park system versus what is in a state park system. Because in a state like Oklahoma or in a state like Texas, you're going to have all these people from all over the globe coming in, and they're not going to know the difference between what is local, what is state, what is federal, but we all do. And what it means for me as I'm building this is it's a different service and a different API I need to integrate with. So this little tree is to bring in the federal national park system. And if I bring it in and I show all the locations, I can focus in on a location and basically get a lot of the same information I got here. And I can focus on this is where it is, this is how to get there, this is the weather and climate most of the year. Remember, this is a research engine. It's assuming that I'm talking on air or giving a presentation based on a lot of this stuff. So it can be whatever you want it to be, but for me it's history. So hey, and parks. I like parks too. Okay, says how to get there, what the hours are, entrance fees, what activities might be there. All of this stuff is going to be content for me when I go to produce it against the World Cup or the Olympic events when people get here. It's just going to be a work in progress. But I can start to go, well, if you're interested in hiking, you can go here, and then we could bundle content by these keywords and tags. All right, so this also is built in to work with the research engine. So if I go in and I say research the site, it's going to bring this up, and I can look at this thing in view here, and then make sure that it's stored so that I don't have to do the things again and again. So with that, I've covered out the transportation layers. So I've got my map layers, what the map looks like at this base layer, what we can change, how we can make it look. All these different things. If I'm telling a story, I can make it grayscale. Here is where I can put layers on top of this base layer so that I can visualize the different networks and things of how to go from point A to point B. But this is raw data that someone brings in based on points of a map. So let's go back to that downtown Dallas example. I've got 3 layers in here. I'm going to make them all visual so that we can see all of them. All right. I have 3 layers in this map now. 1, historical zones and buildings. 2, historical districts, meaning where the city thinks history is going to be emphasized. And then the third one is troublesome intersections in Dallas, because people keep having car crashes, and it's Dallas, so I guess that's normal, but I wanted to understand it, so I pulled that in too. What this means is when I'm interacting with this map, if I work for a newspaper and we want to talk about, well, this is the Peak Suburban Addis Addition Neighborhood Historic District, I can do research based on that. But let's get back into our example of Dealey Plaza and that example of the book depository. This is the West End Historic District. I can research this location now, and it's basing its research just on the cell that is that historic district. And if I wanted to generate insights and do all the same research, I could. But I can also focus in on the other layers. This is the Elm Street intersection that says it's problematic from a car accident perspective. So the next thing I want to talk about is APIs that we can bring in from the US Census, because I've had a lot of people talk to me about location-based things, and every time it's in the context of, well, where is a location in a grouping of, let's say, real estate listings, or a listing of entries in a database. And the way I look at it is every piece of information sort of is assigned different metadata. Here I've got the different layers organized by state, by how the state organizes its information by county or census tract. And then I have all these variables that I want to bring in as layers on top of this map. So if I know I live in a neighborhood and I want to know a neighborhood's mean household income, per capita income, whatever, I want to be able to just bring it in. So here's what it looks like in action. I'm going to focus on the state of Texas. I'm going to focus on census tracts, and I'm going to look first of all at just median household income, because that's one of the layers that people are most curious about. And it is going to bring in data based on my zoom level. So I'm going to get in here and get a little bit closer so it can recalculate. This is going to show me all the data within that Dallas County region we were looking at earlier. And if I roll over, oops, I accidentally scrolled out. See, that's how quickly. So if I roll over, I can see the variable information, mean income of 250, median household income of $250,000. As I scroll through, I can actually do comparisons. So if I want to compare this with a different variable, then I've got that mapping of the A-B comparison to do that. So that's the first thing I want to point out. And if I were to scroll out, it'll recalculate and I can actually see a visualization based on something like a larger region. So let me clear this. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say I'm interested in county-based information based on something new. Median home value. So here, it's going to pull that information based on a county level data wrap up. And the century is unavailable. Let's see, get a timeout. There it is. Okay, so here, that gives me that level of information. Quit zooming. Okay, so here I am at this level, the state level, and I can click to see the information, and if I want to roll over different areas and see the individual county information, I have it. And then as I see the key over here to the left as to the min, median, and max information. Because so many people who work in business intelligence slash analysis have to do GIS or data visualizations or data mapping, or how you would use something like this is up to you, but I'm interested mainly in Oklahoma and Texas. I'm interested in understanding all the ways that we could visualize the data at the county and the census level. And then I'm interested in making sure that I can provide that insight, that data as insights to any customer or any person who might ask me about it. So that's the sort of layer I would bring to this. And as I open up the layers on the variables, it is a very rich thing because we can map everything from connectivity to education to demographics to housing to commuting to labor and employment. So if I wanted to look at the unemployment rate and then try to do some matching for training programs available based on geographic region, I can bring that in. But what I really love is when you mix and match some of these things like location-based entries with the census data, you can really do some impressive things that would say, okay, well, in Dallas, in these locations, this is where they're operating. And that sort of insight is going to be helpful to anybody who does journalism, reporting, communication, or any sort of business analysis for a group or organization. So the other buttons I have down here are more about how I would use the things that I create. So let's say I wanted to go into here. I'm going to clear this map. All right. So now I'm back in my data layer. I still have all my historic sites loaded in from this, my Open Data Explorer that I've brought in. I'm going to go to a more easier to read base map so that I can see where these things are in relationship to streets. And this is what I want to be able to print out or refer out. So I've just, because I do most of my work in images, just created sort of a quick action so I can screen grab it out. But we've also integrated video capture so that if I wanted to do stills or any sort of cinematography based on that 3D layering, we can do that as well. So this is what some of these other data cells are powered by. So at the bottom, I'm going to handle this YouTube Insights one as its own, but at the bottom we'll see I just have a key against all the things that I have built in on my OpenAI mapping layer. So let me go ahead and clear this out. Actually, just come in and make it invisible. So now I'm back at my grayscale. This is downtown Dallas. I want to be able to do things like estimations for how far it might take to travel somewhere based on biking, walking, or riding in a car. And this isn't like Google Maps where it would say, okay, here's what route to take and this is how fast, because that's more product specific that I wanted to get. Instead, this is a simple equation. If you start out at the middle and you start to walk, or you start to drive, or you start to bike, how far can you get within a time frame? Think of that Fugitive movie where he's like, within 3 miles, you need to be able to go this far and cover that. So if I'm in here and I know that I've got a center point, I can generate out a map that would say, okay, based on where you are, here's how fast you can get there. And I think this is, it's at best just a fudge based on how far it is. It's an algorithm that estimates it out. But if you're dealing with the center point, then you can start to estimate out costs for travel and logistics. All right. The final thing I want to show you is more just about, excuse me here, how you would use something for research that might be something you find on YouTube. And one of the biggest ways to get insights from data is to listen to the customer, and social listening is a big part of that. So this is what this application sort of brings in. So let's say I'm doing research on the Camp Mystic problem, the flooding that killed all the campers in Texas last year or earlier this year. I'm going to be able to use the Google or the YouTube API to bring in videos based on view count. So what happens when I click the button, it goes out and it seeks the videos, and I can look at the metadata and I can see which ones have the most comments. And if I'm researching something, I'm trying to understand what the public thinks about a story, whether it's this story or another story, I'm going to be able to say, okay, let's just look at a video. I'm just going to pick one at random. I think there was one about a legislative hearing. This would be good. So, okay, here. This is the legislative hearing. I can load the comments up to make sure that I've got the grounding for what the AI steps I'm going to take next. So I'm going to load up these comments. I only have, it's going to load in 300 as the base of my code, but if we wanted to expand it, we could. Right now I'm looking at the 300 top comments as sampled by relevance. I'm interested in providing what the sentiment is behind the grouping of those. And so if you go in to how this works, it works similar to Amazon looking at reviews. This is going to provide a roll-up of all the comments and what they mean by distribution, segmentation, extraction, etc. It's this level of insights that AI is great for. Taking a limited set of data, feeding it into an engine, and then creating insights that can inform people who really need to take action of some kind. Could I take action automated based on this? Yes. And that's sometimes what'll happen. And with agentic AI, it's going to happen a lot more. But the real purpose for me is to gain insights so that I can understand what's happening. And then once I understand what's happening at this sentiment level, I can run another level of analysis that says, okay, now from a research perspective, what should happen? And I think this is what I kind of want you to understand as I walk through the administration part of this application next, how this works, because it's one after the other. It's loading in the comments as the source of the data. It's analyzing and grouping the data using sort of the first step of the flow. And then it's using the second step of the flow to say, here, let's generate insights. And this is exportable as a data set. So if I want to create a report on it, I've got it and I can do that. Or if I want to do something else and I want to export it as CSV, I have these insights and the sentiment analysis and the comments in data form as well. This is sort of chained AI. And if I go back to the application, what I want to walk you through now is that administrative experience. So I've walked you through how all the different parts of the application work. I've walked you through all the different layers and how we can bring in APIs to map on top of it and how we can introduce AI as a way to do research based on that. If I go into my admin panel, my entire purpose is to take control of this entire application out of the code and into the control of the administrator. So if I go into my system prompts, this is where I'm generating out the system instructions that are informing the AI that you see in that left-hand panel. So a perfect example is that shot creator, where I asked the application to generate a list of shots if I were a videographer using my application for visuals. This is that. It's controlled by my prompt. And if I want to change it, I don't have to go into the code. I can change it right here, click Save Changes, and this automatically feeds from the database into the application. And my changes take effect and I have a better output. If I have something wrong here, I can go into a rabbit hole and research it and fix it without going into the code and without developing anything. But with the example of the comments and the video insights, this is the beauty of going into prompt engineering as a science all itself, because there's different frameworks we can employ here. And as long as I'm grounding my data based on variables anchored in the database and in the application, what we can create can be magical. And if it's not magical, at least we know what needs to happen to make it magic. So all of this is to say, this is one way journalists, content creators, and communicators can use AI to take their career to new levels and new places this year. Because this is an application I built for my own internal purposes. I plan to use it to get 2 deliverables for myself, for my friends, for people who I do business with. So how I use it is up to me. I could take it public and let people use it if I deployed it on an external URL. But as anyone doing a lot with AI will tell you right now, half the fun is building tools just for yourself and then using them and testing them and making them better because you're the subject matter of your workflow and nobody knows you like you. So thanks for listening. Bye-bye.